I get asked a lot about right to work.
McAuliffe has publicly dodged questions about whether he'd repeal Virginia's right to work law. But here's what he said privately.
I will lean in hard on those issues. If it came to my desk, sure, I'd sign it.
Now, special interests are rewarding McAuliffe for supporting repeal.
I'm very proud as governor, working with you in our political operation. We defeated right to work in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Democrat leadership has made repealing right to work their top priority.
If it came to my desk, sure, I'd sign it.
Good for Terry McAuliffe. Bad for workers. Bad for Virginia.
Support any law that weakened or repealed Virginia's right to work law. And just very quickly to each candidate.
The short answer is absolutely not. And my opponent will. He looked at a camera and he said, when the bill's going to come to his desk, he will sign it. And then every union endorsed him. And he's collected literally tens of millions of dollars from the unions for his campaigns. I'm going to protect right to work because if we lose right to work, it's going to be the death knell for Virginia business. And my opponent is going to get rid of it.
And then, of course, we want to ensure that we have a business environment that allows businesses to want to come to Virginia. Right. We can't afford to lose the right to work. We've talked about that. There's so many things that we can do together rather than being at each other's throats. And that's what the people want.
Hi, I'm Mark Mix, president of the National Right to Work Committee, and it's my pleasure to have John Kalb, the vice president of state legislation for the National Right to Work Committee, to get a little debriefing on what happened in Virginia and what it means to the right to work movement. John, welcome. Good to have you on.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, well, listen, Virginia was a big win for the right to work movement. Obviously, it became a major issue in the campaign for governor between Terry McAuliffe and Glenn Youngkin. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, you said it right, Mark. Last Tuesday was a great night for right to work supporters in Virginia and around the country. I mean, obviously, it's still more evidence that right to work is a winning political issue. I mean, 80% of Americans just think it's wrong to force workers to pay union dues just to keep a job. And Virginia went from having the specter of right to work repeal and full monopoly bargaining for government employees to now having a pro right to work governor and a pro right to work majority in the House of Delegates, barring some crazy turn of events and recounts. Yeah. And of course, if they were to repeal right to work in Virginia, they'd take all that forced dues money they'd collect and use it to expand their political empire elsewhere. So it's really a winner on all fronts for rights to work supporters nationwide.
Yeah, indeed, John. And, you know, the right to work issue became a major focal point of the policy part of the legislative activity here in the Commonwealth of Virginia over the last 2 years. In fact, there was a bill introduced to repeal the right to work law. There was a bill to overturn a statutory prohibition against the recognition of union officials for purposes of bargaining in localities here in the Commonwealth. And then in the construction industry, they re-implemented Davis-Bacon. They re-implemented project labor agreements. So union officials had benefited dramatically from the past 2 years. But interestingly enough, the taxpayers and the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia paid attention to what was being done, and they changed all of that last Tuesday. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, it's a sea change in the political culture of the state. Where, I mean, they sent a message. I mean, it was just such a loser for the state on so many fronts. I mean, you know, you look at the Virginia Economic Development Partnership saying that repeal would endanger 32,700 new jobs in only the manufacturing and supply chain sectors. And I mean, you just look at how much Terry McAuliffe decided to tie himself at the hip to the union bosses. I mean, you know, the very night before the election, he was campaigning with Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. I mean, one of the biggest opponents of reopening schools. I mean, it's just a disaster for parents, for taxpayers, for workers, for the economy, and on so many levels. Really good news out of Virginia last Tuesday.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the idea of bringing in Randy Weingarten, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFL-CIO, was really surprising. I mean, that was basically a doubling down by Terry McAuliffe when it came to the forced unionism issue. Not only did Randy Weingarten keep our schools closed and got the moms in Loudoun County fired up, she continued to push an agenda that basically dramatically increased union power. And obviously, while she's a national figure, the fact that Terry McAuliffe embraced her, brought her in the final night of the campaign to basically re-energize the moms in Loudoun County and parents across the Commonwealth as it relates to how schools are run. And Terry McCullough's comment about having, parents not having any role in their children's education, that was really a seminal issue in the campaign as well. And that all kind of boils into the idea of union power. And of course, right-to-work laws are very simple. The 27 states that have them, including Virginia, basically say that the worker, the individual, has the choice of whether or not they want to financially support a labor union. And that individual freedom, that individual liberty manifests itself in several ways, not only in employment, individual employee rights, but also from an economic standpoint. And I think that issue became very clear. And Glenn Youngkin just really pounded that issue throughout the campaign.
No, absolutely right. I mean, everyone you talk to was in his stump speech on a constant basis. He made a big deal out of it because he knew that 80% of Virginians oppose forcing workers to pay union dues. I mean, it's a simple moral case and it's an economic winner too. And when you take those two things together, it becomes a political. I mean, why would anyone support forcing workers to pay union dues unless it's because of seeing some political benefit in the form of union boss contributions to your campaign? But ultimately, no amount of money from the union bosses overrides the fact that the vast majority of people think it's just plain wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, Virginia, it was good in Virginia. Hopefully that momentum goes into 2022 as we face national elections for the members of the House of Representatives and Congress and a good group of senators. I mean, obviously, the right to work issue is a winning issue politically. It's one every time we bring it up. Politicians who embrace freedom in the workplace get rewarded. Politicians who favor forced unionism, the idea of having workers fired for failure to tender dues or fees, end up losing politically. And here at the Right to Work Committee, we got lots of work to do. John, I want to thank you for the work that you did guiding kind of this issue in the campaign, making sure that all Virginians knew where the candidates stood on the issue of forced unionism. I think the committee did a great job. Obviously, we put a tremendous amount of resources in that, not endorsing any candidate, not basically saying vote for or vote against, but saying, hey, you need to know that this candidate stands for freedom and this candidate may stand for compulsion and force when it comes to the workplace. So important job you did. Thank you for the efforts that you put in and for basically mobilizing Virginians on this important issue of forced unionism.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the kind words, and it's my pleasure to help work for freeing workers from forced union dues.
Now get back to work, okay?
Gladly.
All right. Thanks, John. And for all of us here at the National Right to Work Committee, to our supporters and donors and those that engage in this battle over individual worker freedom and the economic benefits it brings, thank you for your support. Without the support of the National Right to Work Committee by folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do this, and John wouldn't be able to mobilize our supporters and Virginians when it comes to protecting freedom in the workplace here in the Commonwealth and ultimately protecting worker freedom across the country. So thanks for the opportunity, and we really appreciate your continued support for this work.